Have you ever told a friend, hey, just tell me the truth and nothing else? I really want to know what's going on. Whether it's a personal advice or buying advice or car advice, sometimes you just want to know the truth and not the sales and marketing pitch. So that's what you're going to get from me. Authentic, honest, transparent car reviews that is not influenced by marketing or sales, but my true opinion. And I have a different background than most car reviewers. Unfortunately, most car reviewers do not have any professional car reviewing experience. Did you know that? And oftentimes they are reviewing cars just based on an hour or 2 hours of drive, and they don't have the actual professional capability to give you a proper, unbiased opinion. Well, I have a different background for one. I have an automotive professional testing experience along with manufacturing, production, design, and engineering. In other words, I've manufactured cars, I've designed cars, and I've done testing professionally as a car tester. And so when I review cars, I'm going to notice things that no one else would notice. And most of all, I'm not going to hold anything back. I'm not being paid by anyone. And I'm simply going to tell you exactly what you should know to know the truth about what this car feels like. In fact, I would say my judgment guideline is to ask myself, in 3 years, would I still like this car? If I own this car, in 3 years, would I still like it? So that's my guideline, my 3-year guideline, and that's how I'm going to be doing car review for you. As you probably know, the full-size truck market is a hot market. It's one of the most promising market despite all the things that are happening in this world. And of course, Nissan Titan, here we are, the brand new one, fits into that category. Unfortunately for Nissan, it hasn't been doing very well. And because of that, in some markets, they're going to stop selling the Titan, which is really unfortunate because after driving this car for a while, it's apparent to me that this car has a lot of interesting features and things that you would probably love. But at the same time, I can see why Nissan struggled to take a place in the market with this car, because it has some quirky things that most likely you won't be too crazy about. So let's start with the styling from the outside. So it's actually beautifully designed truck, particularly with this kind of a brownish beige color, which I don't think I would like, but actually it looks great in person. And this Titan accessory here provides a really sporty, funky look, even though it's not all that functional. And the overall design of this Pro 4X, really well done. Now, I don't know why Nissan continued to carry on with this particular front grille, but that, I would say that's one of the part that maybe makes the Titan not stand out so much in comparison to Ford F-150 and even Toyota Tundra. There's something about this truck that makes it look a little bit old-fashioned. And beautifully designed headlight with a renewed and refreshed design. But something about the whole design that doesn't quite look as refined and as cool as some of the best-selling trucks out there. But cool design aside, let me point out a few things that an average truck buyer may not notice. For example, this particular Pro 4X has a general grabber APT tires, which most people don't think about too much because general grabber isn't necessarily all that well known in the truck market. But the APT, which stands for all-purpose tire, actually is much better than some of those off-road tires such as the KO2s that are so common and popular among the truck buyers. What most truck buyers don't realize that you don't really need a super aggressive off-road tires to off-road. Even something like a general grabber APT, which is more of a highway/street tire, will do just fine in most off-road conditions. And actually the general grabber, as I mentioned, isn't all that well known, but it has one of the best value for the money in terms of performance and in terms of ride quality, and is very quiet. So that's one of the things I wanted to point out. This particular Nissan comes with a really good tire that is a balance of off-roading and highway ride. One of the easiest way to tell if a car is built well or not is to look at the way the bodies come together. I was a former body engineer, and therefore I built bodies for living. I mean car bodies. And therefore what I do, the first thing I do is I go and touch the door seams as well as the seam between the hood and the fender. This is one of the best way to tell whether the automotive engineers and the production people have done a proper job. So here is how you can tell. If you put your finger right over the surface here and kind of try to tell if there's a difference in height between the fender and the hood, that is almost right away will tell you if the body was put together well. And this, I guess, being a Nissan and being a Japanese car in this case, really well built. I cannot almost tell the difference. That this hood is just a slight, almost micromillimeter higher than the fender, but for a truck to have the seam this tight and accurate is actually quite astonishing. If you did the same thing with some of the domestic trucks, you'll find the gap much wider, and there'll be a lot more difference in the panel between the fender and the hood. And you can kind of kneel beside the truck in this case and walk along to see whether or not all the body panels line up. And you can tell in this particular case, the panels look like they came from a single sheet of metal. Now that's a pretty difficult achievement. I see that in Toyota cars and in this case a Nissan car, but many manufacturers struggle to get that done right. And it's not just the paint job that you should be looking for. It really is, as I mentioned, these the seams and the fit of the body panels. And this particular truck exceeds my expectation for a truck. So even here between the front door and the fender, the fit is almost perfect. And to get that to that level requires exceptional engineering and production. And I can tell you that even though this truck may not be all that popular anymore, it is well built. Well, here's one exception. I can tell right here between the rear door and this particular pillar here, there's a bit of a bigger gap than in all the other gaps I've seen. But otherwise, this car is really well built. Taking a closer look from the back here, this Titan is again cool looking. And more importantly, as you open, it has a slow, soft close. Now, I apologize for the leaves in the back here, but if you look at closely though, these are actually, first of all, these are really solid panels, plastic composite materials, prevent from scratching. And you'll notice that this is slightly higher than the bed, so that when you actually put something from behind and slide it in, it will nicely level off to the truck bed. That's actually designed by intentionally, I believe. But on the other hand, these grooves are a little bit deep in my taste, because when you get dirt or sand or even ice during the winter time, it's gonna be a little bit hard to get it out, because it's almost square design instead of maybe a little bit beveled, which will allow these dirt to come off easily. This is going to be a heck of a time to wash it off if it's covered in sand or dirt. You can just bring it at an angle, I suppose, and wash it off. And because this section is angled here on this side, should wash off this way. Also interesting, you'll see this part that slides out, give you additional point to connect and to install and other items in the truck bed. And here's an interesting also thing I pointed out, these tie down here. Usually in other cars, these tie downs are bare metal and not have these covering for protection, but just like the truck bed protection that you see in the back here, it's also the same protection you see on the tie down. So well designed. Again, as I mentioned, these items here are more of aesthetic reasons. It looks cool. It looks really cool. Well built, very solid. But unless you're standing inside the truck bed and needing a place to hold, it doesn't serve a lot of function. but nevertheless it looks amazing. Let's hop inside to see what neat feature this truck has. Lots of space in the back, and it is actually very well designed, quite modernized, especially in comparison to its primary competitor, Toyota Tundra. This truck has more updated features than the Tundra. Taking a quick look through the inside of this truck already reveals that it's got a bunch of other features that are not in some competitors. Again, particularly in comparison to a Tundra, which is getting really old in terms of design. So for example, this has electric steering control up and down. There you go. That is pretty rare in this type of truck, along with a great grab handle on both sides. Some manufacturers tend to skip so that there's only on one side. And this car has a Panamera roof, which is amazing. That's pretty rare as well in the big truck. Lots of buttons all over the place, but it has a modernized infotainment system, still pretty easy to use, along with all kinds of other features. This particular one has both a USB, regular USB, as well as USB-C. What's annoying these days is that, particularly in the German cars, they're only providing USB-C and not the regular USB-A's. This Nissan got smart and is providing both types altogether. Lots of place to put things, and big cup holders as well. Plenty of space in terms of the center console, and glove compartment as well is reasonable size. And I like this kind of silverish trim level, and the red stitching as well. Definitely quite modernized and really well done. In comparison to its prime competitor. It's unfortunate though, even though the interior is one of the best, I think, it just isn't selling this truck. And I think it's mainly because this truck does not stand out in comparison to other trucks around. Now, most car reviewers do not really talk about the performance of the car in a proper way, mainly because they just don't know. They've never been a professional car reviewer or professional car tester. So I can tell you exactly how this truck feels different from other models. So first of all, unlike modern SUVs and crossovers, most of these trucks still use hydraulic steering. The reason why that's an interesting point to remember is that hydraulic steering uses up a little bit more gas because it still uses hydraulic pump. But because of that, it gives you way more steering feel. With the modern technology, many of them converted to electric steering, which with some of the new software can provide a reasonable steering feel, but many of them lacks road feel. Well, you're not gonna have to worry about that in this car. And in fact, I would say this truck, Nissan Titan's truck steering is heavier and has more road feel than all the other full-size trucks I've driven. Most of them have gone to a lighter steering feel and have decided that people do not want to have a steering that's too heavy to maneuver. But if you're one of those people who like kind of heavy, solid steering that truly feels like a truck, well, this is actually one of the trucks with the heaviest, most truck-like feeling. Now, on the contrary, because of that, it's not as nimble perhaps because the steering is quite heavy. And for some people, you might find the steering too heavy. I think average person will find the steering too heavy. Tundra steering is lighter. The Ford F-150 is lighter. The Dodge steering also quite a bit lighter as well. And so I can see that an average person driving this truck will say, you know what, this steering is too heavy. But if you like a real truck feel and you like a solid steering feel, this one gives you really heavy, but truly truck-like feel. And personally, I like it a lot, but it is a little bit heavier than I thought. So that's something to keep in mind. As you drive this truck around town and on the highway, thanks to the General Grabber's all-purpose tire, which offers a way more comfortable ride than heavy-duty off-road tires, this car gives you a surprisingly smooth ride. It doesn't hop and bump too much over bumpy surfaces. It's pretty smooth. As I mentioned, the steering feel is still a little heavy, I think, for most average person. I like it a lot, and if you like the truck feel, you'll love it as well. And otherwise, the car is very quiet. It's quiet, it's smooth. It is surprisingly solid, even though its basic chassis and design also dates back several years. So I'm going over a bump here, for example, and it's a good test of whether or not the car can handle the bump. And one thing you'll notice is that right after you go over the bump, it doesn't continue to shake the truck. So a car with a poor suspension will hop over that. Particularly some of the traditional old-fashioned trucks tend to do that, but this one actually hops right over and stays flat. It does not continue to hop. So it's a proof of a really good suspension system, I think, compared to other trucks. It has less tendencies to be bumpy, and you'll find the overall ride very smooth. It is very much in alignment with other full-size SUVs. If you think of like a truck like a Nissan Armada or even Toyota Sequoia, this is sort of a feel. It have a very similar feel. So ultimately, my final question that I ask myself is, if I were to have purchased this truck in 3 years, would I still like it? Would I still love it? Would I hate it? Would I want to sell it? That is the most important question any buyer should ask. Would I like it in the long term? Not based on a 15 minutes test drive or even a 2 or 3 hour drive. But what happens if you drive this in and out, day in, day out, and you continue to drive it, you continue to use it? So here's my take. In terms of the overall design, it doesn't really matter. What most people don't realize is it doesn't really matter if you're not too crazy about the design, because you learn to live with that. I always say things like color and design, you basically learn to live with that. So if you're not too crazy, that's gonna go away after a year or so. But what will bother you or might not bother you is your daily use. So what do you use the most? Well, you're going to hop in and out of this truck often. So I like the Predator step in this particular truck. And so as I go into the truck and start up and use the truck every day, what would annoy me and what would not annoy me? So one thing I noticed right away is that, and I'll hop out, I have to show that to you. The seat arrangement. Now this would depends on your height and your build and so forth. I'm an average person, 5'8", build, average weight. And what I found out is that in the seating arrangement is not quite right. This one rises a little bit high in the front, and the back doesn't come up as much as you would like. On the other trucks, I found the adjustment to be a little bit more whatchamacallit, there's a little bit more leeway to move things up and down. So I find myself sliding down a little bit on this particular seat. It's nice and wide here. It's very long here, I should say. So you'll be comfortable if you have a long leg and so forth. For an average person like myself, I found this to be a little bit long, and because the back does not come up as much as I would like, I'm sliding back a little bit. Of course, no problem with adjustment in the back. In fact, the lumbar support adjustment here comes way out, a little bit more than the average truck that I've seen. And so you can actually adjust the back to your liking, absolutely no problem. I love the thick steering and this little bit of a bump that you have, almost like a sports car design here. Really solid steering feel, and the overall design quite beautiful. You won't get tired of the design. You will probably really like the Panamera roof, because you don't get that in many of the trucks. and the quality, overall quality inside, like a stitching and the feel of the button, all that stuff, actually quite first class. There's nothing here that will annoy you over time. Moving into the back, again, most people will buy a tonneau cover, so I would still suggest that you have that. As I mentioned, there's a this opens with a nice soft dampened feel, but just keep in mind these grooves can trap debris, and then when you try to close this, it's a bit heavier than you like. It's very manageable, but it's a little bit heavier than you might like. I think you will get used to it over time. That's not a problem with that, and everything else is pretty good. I would say the only part that might annoy me after 3 years is the steering might be heavy, and I actually like heavy steering wheels, so it's kind of strange coming from me. But if you want to just take it easy and drive in a way that's comfortable, you might find this truck has a steering that's a bit heavier than you like. And I would suspect over 2 or 3 years, you might say, you know what, the steering is a little bit too heavy for me, I don't really want it. I suspect that might be your number one complaint if you own this car for that long. Otherwise, based on all the evaluation I did about the fit and finish, the body panels, and the way this truck is built, I don't think you're going to have any problem with the build finish. It has a really well built body, and the fit and finish looks good. You're going to be happy with the choice of tire if this is a tire that happens to be in your truck, and it will serve a purpose really, really well. Would you like it better than Toyota Tundra, let's say? I would say, would I like this over a Tundra? And I would say the answer is yes, because he has more features than a Tundra. Tundra is really have become outdated. Of course, there's a new model coming out next year, and that could make a huge difference. But right now, as it stands, this particular Titan has more modern features, and other factors makes this truck more appealing to me. The V8 engine in this Nissan Smooth, great delivery. Again, I know that the entire industry is moving toward a smaller engine, turbocharged engine, and so forth, but there's nothing like a good old-fashioned V8. And of course, the gas consumption isn't great because of that, but if you don't mind paying for the gas, you're always going to like a feel of a V8 better than a turbocharged V6 engine. The only last thing I'll point out here, this is common with all Nissan, but to lock the car, you push the button, of course. I don't have the key right now with me. And then to unlock, you also push the button, and so it doesn't have the feature where you just touch the door handle and unlocks and you open. So that is common with Nissan and some other manufacturer like Mazda as well. And it's one thing that I don't like, which I will probably continue not to like if I were to own this truck. I just want to come to the truck, touch the door handle, and pull and open, and instead of pushing this button. But it does obviously have a start-stop button here for engine, to simply press the button to start, keyless I should say, and that's obviously pretty common with all the different cars and trucks these days. So that is there, and everything else about this truck is pretty comfortable. Once again, in 3 years, would I be happy with this truck? Personally, I would say I would give it 7 out of 10. So if I were to use a rating of a 10, I would say there's a 70% chance that in 3 years I will say I'm gonna keep this truck. Why not higher? Because the steering is a bit heavy, and the heavy gas consumption might get to me if I'm driving a lot, and ultimately truck buyers can be quite finicky, so they're very loyal to other brands, and you might be tempted to migrate over to Toyota, or actually Ford, which is really Ford and Dodge, the two leading truck makers right now. So you might be tempted to move to those truck brands after a couple of years, but otherwise it's a really quite well built. If you always wanted sort of a Japanese model, a Japanese brand, but you're not necessarily drawn to Tundra because Tundra is outdated. This is a really good option, one that you will probably be happy with. So that's my review for the Nissan Titan, brand new Titan Pro 4X. I'll give it 7 out of 10 in terms of whether you will like it in 3 years time.